Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today, really deep into something I know you're super interested in, and that's how culture and religion shape what we eat.
Yeah.
It's more than just calories and vitamins, right?
Oh, absolutely. Food is such a powerful reflection of our history, values, and identities.
Exactly. It's a fascinating world, so let's get started. I think when a lot of people hear American cuisine, burgers and fries are what come to mind, maybe apple pie.
Yeah, you're right. Those are kind of like the classic images. But American food is so much more than that, isn't it? It's always changing, and it reflects the nation's history as a melting pot of different cultures.
Like every ingredient has a story to tell, huh?
Exactly. And today, let's be honest, convenience plays a huge role in what we eat. I mean, over 40% of what Americans spend on food is for food away from home. That's a pretty big number.
Wow, that's a lot. But I guess it makes sense with our busy lives. But I've always wondered, does that mean we're sacrificing nutrition for convenience?
Well, it's a valid concern. Research shows that food away from home, while often delicious, tends to be lower in nutritional quality than meals cooked at home. The portions are often larger, and many restaurants use cooking methods like deep frying that, add extra calories and fat. Plus, there can be hidden sugars and sodium lurking in those dishes.
So it's not just what we eat, but how it's cooked, too. What are some things we can do to make healthier choices when eating out? Because I know I struggle with that sometimes.
Oh, we've all been there. Honestly, one of the best things you can do is don't go to a restaurant starving. It's so much harder to resist those tempting, less healthy options when you're famished. Checking the menu online beforehand can also help you find healthier choices. Oh, and watch out for those sneaky words like crispy, creamy, or battered. They usually mean more calories. It's always a good idea to choose grilled or baked dishes over fried ones, and don't be afraid to ask for substitutions, like swapping white rice for brown rice or a side salad instead of fries.
Those are really good tips. It's all about being informed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think it's time to broaden our view a little and talk about how culture, in a broader sense, shapes our food choices. And this goes beyond just ethnicity.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture affects how we view what's edible, how we prepare food, even the importance we give to certain dishes. Like, think back to when you were a kid. Was there a food you absolutely hated, but now you enjoy it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I used to hate broccoli with a passion, but now I roast it with garlic and lemon, and it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
How does that happen? How does culture, override those initial dislikes?
Well, each culture has its core foods, the staples that are like the base of their diet. Think rice, wheat, potatoes, things like that. And then there are secondary foods eaten regularly, but not every day. And finally, you have your peripheral foods. Those are enjoyed once in a while based on personal preference. As we're exposed to these different food groups, our tastes change and we start to like new flavors and textures that maybe we didn't like before.
So it's like expanding our culinary vocabulary.
Exactly. But it's not only about the ingredients themselves, it's also how they're prepared. Take, for example, the difference between stir-frying vegetables, like in a lot of Asian cooking, and boiling them, which you might see more in some European cuisines. The same ingredient, but cooked differently. And then there's the symbolism of food, holiday feasts, comfort foods that remind us of childhood, even dishes that are connected to gender roles.
It's like food becomes a language, a way to express our heritage and identity. But what happens when we encounter new cultures and their food traditions?
Well, that's when dietary acculturation comes in.
Dietary acculturation.
It's the process of adjusting to a new culture's eating habits. And it's way more complicated than just switching out a few ingredients here and there. It can be a good thing, leading to a more diverse diet, but it also has its challenges.
So what are some of the unexpected things that can happen during this culinary exchange? I'm curious about how it works in real life.
Well, one thing that's interesting is that research shows that dietary acculturation isn't always a straight line. For example, studies of South Asian immigrants in Canada found that while they were eating more fruits and vegetables, they also started eating more processed foods and sugary drinks. So it's like this complex balancing act between keeping familiar flavors and embracing new ones, and this is often influenced by things like accessibility, cost, and social pressures.
Makes you wonder, why are food habits often the last thing to change when people move to a new culture?
Yeah, that is a great question. Eating is such a personal and intimate thing, It's often tied to family traditions and habits that are so deeply ingrained in us. And it takes place in our homes, away from the public eye, so it's more resistant to change. It's also a way for people to connect with their heritage and hold on to their cultural identity in a new environment.
It's like food becomes a bridge between the past and the present, a source of comfort amidst change. Now let's shift our focus a bit. Let's look at some specific cultural groups within the U.S. to see how these dynamics play out.
Sounds good. Let's start with African American food traditions. It's a rich and complex world.
Soul food is such a vital part of that story. It's more than just a collection of dishes, though, right?
Absolutely. Soul food is a reflection of history, resilience, and cultural identity. It developed during times of hardship, using ingredients that were accessible and affordable. Things like corn, beans, rice, and less desirable cuts of meat. It's really a testament to resourcefulness and creativity.
It's food born out of necessity, but it's become so much more a symbol of community and shared heritage. But I've heard there are health concerns with the traditional soul food diet, right? Like it can be high in fat and sodium.
Yeah, that's true. Traditional soul food does tend to be high in fat, cholesterol, and sodium, which can lead to health problems like high blood pressure and heart disease. But it's important to be sensitive and nuanced when talking about this. If we only focus on the potential health risks, we're missing the cultural importance of these dishes and the historical context they came from.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance between honoring tradition and promoting healthy habits. How about we move on to Mexican-American food traditions now? I've always loved the vibrant flavors and fresh ingredients.
Me too. The traditional Mexican diet is actually considered very healthy. It focuses on corn, beans, rice, vegetables, and fruits, so it's naturally low in fat and high in fiber. It's a really great combination for overall health. However, just like with many cultures, acculturation has introduced new challenges.
I'm guessing the shift towards more processed foods and fast food has affected the health of Mexican-American communities.
Unfortunately, yes. As access to a wider variety of foods has increased, so has the consumption of processed foods, sugary drinks, and less healthy fats. This change in diet has contributed to a rise in obesity and type 2 diabetes. It's a reminder that changes in eating habits don't always have positive outcomes, especially when things like marketing and affordability play a role.
Definitely. Now, to round out our exploration of American cultural influences, let's look at Chinese-American cuisine.
Okay, great.
What are some of the main principles and ingredients that define this culinary tradition?
Well, the traditional Chinese diet is fascinating because of its focus on balance and harmony. There's this idea of yin and yang, opposing forces that need to be in equilibrium, and this plays a central role in food choices. Foods are classified as hot or cold, not in terms of temperature, but in how they are perceived to affect the body.
That's a completely different way of thinking about food than we're used to in Western cultures. What are some of the staple ingredients in traditional Chinese cooking?
Rice is a big one, particularly in southern China. Wheat products are more common in the north. Vegetables are used a lot, as well as soy products, seafood, and meat. But meat is usually eaten in smaller portions than in Western diets.
And how has acculturation affected this traditional way of eating?
As with many immigrant groups, with acculturation we see an increase in fat, protein, sugar, and cholesterol in the Chinese American diet. There's more consumption of fast food, processed foods, and sugary drinks. However, it's important to note that Asian Americans as a whole have the lowest rates of obesity among all cultural groups in the U.S.
That's really interesting. It seems like there's a lot we can learn from traditional food cultures, even as they adapt to a more modern context.
I completely agree. It's about recognizing the wisdom and balance inherent in these traditional ways of eating while navigating the challenges of our changing food environment.
Well, today we've really explored how American food culture is a blend of different influences and how these influences can be both good and bad. But we've only just scratched the surface of how deeply our beliefs shape what we eat. Next time, we're going to delve into the world of religious dietary practices, where faith and food come together in some really fascinating and often unexpected ways.
You know, it's amazing how religion can sometimes have an even bigger impact on what people eat than their nationality or culture.
That's so true. It's like food becomes this tangible expression of faith and a way to connect with a shared history and community.
Exactly.
Where do you think we should start exploring this intersection of food and faith?
Well, let's start with Christianity. It's a broad religion with a lot of different practices. Some denominations, like Roman Catholics, abstain from meat on certain days, like Fridays during Lent.
Oh, right. And they also fast for an hour before taking communion.
Yes, and Eastern Orthodox Christians have many feast and fast days throughout the year, each with its own special meaning and culinary traditions.
I see.
But within Protestantism, there's more variation. Some groups, like Mormons, abstain from coffee, tea, alcohol, and tobacco, and they're encouraged to limit their meat consumption.
Oh, wow.
Seventh-day Adventists often follow a lacto-ovo vegetarian diet, so they eat dairy and eggs, but not meat.
It's fascinating how these practices reflect different interpretations of religious teachings and how they've shaped the culinary traditions within each denomination.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's turn our attention to Judaism. They have very specific dietary laws known as kosher. What are some of the key principles behind keeping kosher?
Kosher guidelines are incredibly detailed. It's not just a list of what you can and can't eat. They dictate which animals are considered kosher, how they must be slaughtered and prepared, and even how the food should be consumed.
Wow.
These laws have roots in ancient traditions and interpretations of religious texts, and many Jews observe them as a way to connect with their heritage and express their faith.
I've always been curious about this. So which animals are considered kosher?
Well, for mammals to be considered kosher, they have to have split hooves and chew their cud,
Okay.
like cows, sheep, goats, and deer.
Got it.
For birds, it's mostly domestic types, like chicken, turkey, goose, and duck. Fish must have fins and scales to be kosher,
So that means...
which rules out shellfish.
Right. What about the whole separating milk and meat thing? I've heard of it, but I'm not really sure what it involves.
That's a fundamental principle of kosher dietary laws. Milk and meat can't be eaten together, and there are specific waiting periods between consuming them. It can be anywhere from 1 to 6 hours, depending on the tradition.
I see.
This means observant households have separate sets of dishes, utensils, and even sinks for meat and dairy.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It's a complex system that definitely requires attention to detail.
It does. So how do Islamic dietary laws known as halal compare to kosher?
There are actually a lot of similarities between halal and kosher practices. They share a lot of values and principles. Both allow similar animals, prohibit pork and blood, and require specific slaughtering methods that minimize the animal suffering.
So the basic principles are pretty similar. Then what are some of the key differences?
One major difference is that halal guidelines also forbid alcohol and other intoxicants.
Oh.
And while kosher laws focus on separating milk and meat, halal guidelines extend this to avoiding cross-contamination during food preparation and storage. There's a big emphasis on maintaining purity and avoiding anything that could be harmful or detrimental to spiritual well-being.
Interesting. So food becomes a path to a more mindful and intentional way of life.
Yeah, you could say that. Now let's move on to Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
Vegetarianism is often emphasized in this religion. Why is that?
Okay.
Well, the concept of ahimsa, which is nonviolence towards all living things, is central to Hinduism.
Yeah.
While not all Hindu traditions strictly forbid eating meat, many Hindus choose to be vegetarian out of respect for animal life and a belief in the interconnectedness of all beings.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there any specific foods that are seen as especially pure or auspicious in Hinduism?
Dairy products like milk, yogurt, and ghee, which is clarified butter, are very highly regarded in Hinduism.
Okay.
They're seen as symbols of purity and nourishment, and they're often used in religious ceremonies and offerings.
I see. It's amazing how food takes on this spiritual significance and becomes so intertwined with religious practices.
It really is.
Now, to finish our exploration of religious dietary practices, let's talk about Buddhism. What are some of the guiding principles that shape Buddhist food choices?
Well, Buddhist teachings emphasize mindfulness, compassion, and moderation. And these principles extend to food as well. While there isn't one set of dietary rules in Buddhism, many Buddhists are vegetarian based on the principle of ahimsa.
I've heard that Buddhist monks often practice mindful eating, like really paying attention to each bite and appreciating the nourishment it provides.
Yes, that's a common practice in a lot of Buddhist traditions.
Right.
It's a way to cultivate gratitude and awareness. They see food as a gift and don't take it for granted.
That's beautiful.
It's about slowing down, savoring each bite, and appreciating the interconnectedness of everything, from the farmer who grew the food to the cook who prepared it.
It sounds like a wonderful way to turn something as simple as eating into a spiritual practice.
It really is.
Wow, we've covered so much today, from the world of American food culture, which is all about convenience, to the ancient traditions of religious dietary laws. It's clear that what we eat is influenced by so much more than just taste and nutrition.
Absolutely. Food is such a powerful cultural and religious symbol. And understanding these influences can help us appreciate the diversity of human experience and how our beliefs shape our lives.
It's been a really enlightening journey, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on a couple of emerging trends in the food world: meal kit delivery services and the growing popularity of prepared foods from grocery stores.
Okay.
They're marketed as being super convenient, but are they as good as traditionally prepared home-cooked meals?
That's a great question. Well, meal kits definitely have their advantages. They're convenient, they offer variety, and they help with portion control, which can be helpful for busy people or those who struggle with meal planning.
Right.
They can also be a fun way to try new cuisines and learn some new cooking skills, but they tend to be more expensive than cooking from scratch and often have more sodium than you might expect.
Interesting. What about those prepared foods from grocery stores? They're
Mhm.
everywhere now. It seems like entire aisles are dedicated to ready-to-eat meals.
It's true. They've definitely become super popular because they appeal to our desire for quick and easy meals in our busy lives.
Yeah.
While they can be convenient in a pinch, it's important to pay attention to the nutritional content. Some prepared foods can be high in sodium saturated fat and calories, and they often lack the freshness and flavor of a home-cooked meal. Plus, they're usually more expensive than making meals at home.
So it seems like that age-old wisdom of cooking at home using fresh ingredients still holds true, even in today's fast-paced world.
I absolutely agree. There's something so satisfying about making a meal from scratch, knowing exactly what's going into it and sharing it with people you care about. It's a way to connect with our culinary heritage, nourish our bodies with healthy ingredients, and create lasting memories around the dinner table.
It's about so much more than just fuel. It's about connection, tradition, and the joy of creating something delicious and nourishing with our own hands.
Exactly.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the world of food and culture. We've explored how our beliefs, backgrounds, and traditions shape what we eat and why. But before we go, I have one last thought-provoking question for our listener to think about. So, in a world, where food trends are always changing and we have access to global flavors like never before, how can we appreciate and preserve these diverse food traditions while also making sure we're eating healthy? It's
Yeah.
tricky, but I think it's something we need to think about.
Yeah, definitely. It's a balancing act, for sure. We want to honor our food heritage and what food means culturally, but we also want to make smart choices that are good for our health.
Exactly. It's like finding that perfect spot where tradition and modern nutrition knowledge meet. So what are some things we can actually do to, navigate all of this?
Well, I think it all starts with being curious. Being open to exploring how different cultures approach food, trying out new ingredients, maybe even learning some traditional cooking methods from different parts of the world. It's about expanding our culinary horizons and recognizing that there's a lot of wisdom in these diverse traditions.
I love that. So it's about enjoying all the amazing global cuisines out there
Mm-hmm.
while still being mindful of our own health goals. It's kind of like a food adventure, right?
Exactly. And it can be a really fun and delicious way to connect with people from different backgrounds and learn more about the world.
Sure.
Who knows? Maybe we'll even find some new favorite dishes along the way.
Totally. It's about embracing the journey and remembering that food is more than just something to eat. It's a way to connect with others, experience different cultures, and grow as a person. This has been such an incredible deep dive into the world of food and culture. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights with us, and for helping us understand how our beliefs and backgrounds influence what we eat.
It's been my pleasure. Food is something I'm always fascinated by, and I hope our listeners have gained a new appreciation for how culture, religion, and nutrition all intertwine.
I'm sure they have. It's been a truly eye-opening conversation. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you something to think about and inspired you to keep exploring the amazing world of food and its impact on our lives. Until next time, happy eating.